People like you don't belong here, the auctioneer snarled, yanking the registration form from Sam Harris's weathered hands. Snickers echoed through the grand hall as the 73-year-old farmer stood frozen still, clutching the envelope packed with his life savings. Security guards appeared without a word. They marched Sam out of the building. But what the crowd didn't know, the security camera near the entrance had caught every second. And just minutes later, 5 black SUVs with the state flag roared to a stop at the front steps. Governor Melissa Grant had arrived, and the auction would never be the same again. Samuel Sam Harris had farming in his blood long before he was old enough to understand what it meant. His family had tilled the soil of Lacey County for nearly a century, their story woven into every ridge and furrow of the land. His grandfather Elijah Harris had first broken ground there in 1927, hauling stones out of the fields with his bare hands and stubborn resolve. During the Great Depression, when dust storms turned the sky brown and promises dried up like creek beds, Elijah refused to leave. Where others abandoned their farms to the winds of fate, he stayed planting seeds even when the ground seemed dead. Sam's father George inherited that same grit. He modernized when necessary, adding tractors, installing irrigation, but he never gave up the old ways entirely. There was a rhythm to the land. George believed a language that only those who truly listened could hear. And so Sam grew up in that cadence, learning how to read a storm by the smell of the wind, how to mend a fence with nothing but a strand of wire, and patience, how to coax life from the stubborn Kansas soil. Sam wasn't just connected to his farm, he was the farm. Every sunrise he witnessed, every seed he planted, every harvest he celebrated, it all reinforced an unspoken vow passed down from generations. This land is not just yours to work, it's yours to protect. In small-town America, men like Sam Harris are the invisible foundation on which everything else rests. They don't make headlines. They don't seek attention. Their lives are measured not in public achievements, but in quiet triumphs. A calf born strong on a cold night, a field that yields just enough to break even a roof that holds through one more storm. They live by codes of loyalty, honesty, and perseverance that seem almost quaint in a world increasingly obsessed with speed and spectacle. There's an enduring spirit to people like Sam, one that embodies the purest ideals of the American dream. It's a belief that with enough hard work, decency, and resilience, a person can carve out a place for themselves, build something that will last longer than their own lifetime. These are the men and women who plant oak trees they'll never sit under, who mend barns knowing a younger generation might one day dance in the hayloft, who pour sweat into the soil without expecting applause. Yet modern society often overlooks these quiet lives. In a world of instant news, viral moments, and celebrity culture, the slow, steady dignity of small-town farmers is easy to ignore. Their struggles don't trend on social media. Their victories aren't televised. Their losses, whether a failed crop or a foreclosure, happen in silence, unnoticed by the wider world. The irony is painful. The very people who embody values our culture claims to revere self-reliance. Perseverance, humility are often the ones pushed to the margins. In boardrooms, far from the field, decisions are made about land, food, and futures without a single thought for men. Like Sam, laws change markets, shift prices fall, and still they plant. Still they hope Sam Harris wasn't a man of speeches or slogans. He didn't see himself as a symbol. He simply saw himself as a steward. One more link in a long chain stretching back before he was born, reaching forward into a future he might never see. His connection to the land was not sentimental but sacred. It was duty, plain and simple. And on that quiet, heavy morning, when he pulled on his best blue shirt, tucked the envelope of life savings into his jacket, and drove his fading pickup into town, Sam carried with him not just a hope to save his land, but the weight of a promise made long ago. A promise whispered in the fields by every Harris who came before him. Hold fast, stand firm, and never let the land go without a fight. For most of his life, Sam Harris believed that if you worked hard, kept your word, and paid your dues, the world would leave you in peace. It was a simple philosophy rooted deep in the soil, alongside the rows of corn and wheat he had tended since he was a boy. Sam paid his bills the way his father had, by check in person when possible, always on time. He didn't trust online banking, didn't have a smartphone, and he kept every receipt folded neatly in a battered metal filing cabinet at the farmhouse. So when the official-looking letter arrived from the county office, Sam almost didn't open it. He assumed it was a standard notice, maybe a property tax reminder, maybe an updated zoning regulation. It wasn't until he finally sat down at the kitchen table that evening, his glasses perched low on his nose, that he saw the words stamped in heavy black ink, "Notice of Public Auction." At first he thought it had to be a mistake. The Miller farm, his farm, was listed among properties scheduled for auction due to unpaid taxes. His heart hammered in his chest as he read and reread the document, hoping some line had been misinterpreted, some clerical error exposed, but the facts stood firm on the page. According to the county, Sam owed nearly $14,000 in back taxes. Taxes he had no idea existed. The next morning, Sam drove into town, the letter clutched in his calloused hand. At the county office, a young woman behind the counter, no older than his youngest granddaughter, offered a sympathetic but helpless shrug. She explained that after his wife passed away the previous year, there had been complications in how the property was reassessed. Small errors in documentation combined with overlooked mailings had allowed penalties and interest to snowball. Legally, the process was too far along to stop unless the full amount was paid. Sam listened quietly, his hat clutched in his hands, nodding even as confusion clouded his mind. He wasn't used to systems that moved without people. He was used to handshakes and face-to-face understanding, not faceless paperwork and automated notices. Somewhere along the way, the rules of the world had shifted under his boots, and he hadn't noticed until it was too late. He left the county office feeling adrift. For a man like Sam, stability wasn't about money in the bank or stocks in a portfolio. It was the land itself, the surety that tomorrow would bring another sunrise over the same fields, another season of planting and harvesting. Stability was the rhythm of nature and the dignity of honest work. Now, with a single slip of paper, all of that was unraveling. In his younger years, Sam might have shrugged off a crisis, rolling up his sleeves and outworking the problem, but age had brought a different reality. His hands, once so strong, now ached after long days. His knees stiffened in the cold mornings. He moved slower, thought slower. The idea of fighting a complex legal system, chasing down paperwork, hiring lawyers, it was overwhelming in a way that physical labor never had been. There's a cruel fragility to getting older that no one prepares you for. The same systems you once trusted can turn cold and indifferent. Processes you once navigated with ease become mazes of fine print and impersonal policies. A single missed letter, a forgotten form, a misunderstanding buried in bureaucracy. These tiny cracks can widen into chasms large enough to swallow a lifetime of work. And yet Sam refused to crumble. He refused to believe that generations of sweat and sacrifice could be swept away by a misplaced decimal or a bureaucratic oversight. With quiet determination, he decided he would do the only thing he knew how to do: show up, pay what he owed, and fight for his land with the same stubborn heart that had carried his family through droughts, wars, and depressions. He didn't hire a lawyer. He didn't launch a social media campaign. Instead, he did what he had always done. He trusted that showing up, standing tall, and doing the right thing would be enough. He had no way of knowing that the world he trusted would try to push him aside. And he had no way of knowing that sometimes, just sometimes, the quiet dignity of a single man could still shake a system to its core. Sam Harris woke before the first light touched the horizon. It was instinct, the same instinct that had governed his mornings for nearly 70 years. But today was different. Today wasn't about tending fields or checking on livestock. Today he was fighting for something deeper, the right to keep the soil his family had bled into for generations. In the dim bathroom light, Sam shaved slowly, dragging the blade carefully across his weathered face. His hand wasn't as steady as it once was, but the ritual mattered. Clean-shaven hair combed neatly back, he pulled on his Sunday shirt, the pale blue one he reserved for church services and funerals, and pressed the creases flat with his palm. It was a small dignity, but it mattered. Appearances he knew shouldn't define a man, but today he couldn't afford to be mistaken for anything less than serious. Beneath the mattress, where he had always kept things most precious, Sam retrieved the old postal envelope. Inside, meticulously counted and arranged by denomination, was every dollar he had managed to save. He counted it again, just to be sure. 14. 370, enough to settle the debt, enough to save his land. He tucked the envelope deep inside the inner pocket of his jacket, pressing his hand against it one last time for reassurance. Driving his faded '92 Ford pickup into town, Sam watched as the landscape changed from open fields to asphalt, and glass SUVs gleamed under the rising sun. Men in expensive suits and polished shoes gathered outside the courthouse, sipping coffee from cups that probably cost more than Sam's breakfast. They didn't notice the old man in the battered truck finding a spot at the far end of the lot. If they saw him at all, they saw nothing more than worn boots, a frayed jacket, a relic from a world they had long since paved over. Inside the grand hall, the auction was already buzzing. Developers and speculators clustered in small groups, their conversations low and urgent. Sam walked to the back, filling out the registration form carefully, his pen strokes slow and deliberate. When he approached the registration desk, the young clerk's smile faltered as she took in his appearance. She leaned over and whispered to her colleague, and within seconds a man in an expensive suit and gold watch approached. "Mr. Harris," the auctioneer said, frowning at Sam's form. "You're planning to pay in cash." Sam nodded and reached for the envelope. "I have the full amount." The auctioneer didn't even glance at the bills. His voice grew louder, sharp enough to cut the hum of the room. "We require a certified check or bank guarantee. This isn't a flea market." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Sam stiffened but said nothing. He tried to explain, his voice calm but firm, that the auction notice hadn't mentioned any such requirement. But the auctioneer dismissed him with a wave of his hand. "Security will escort you out," he announced, turning away. Two guards appeared, polite but firm. They took Sam by the elbows, not roughly, but in a way that left no room for argument. As they guided him toward the door, Sam caught snippets of laughter, mocking whispers, the kind of cruel amusement reserved for those who are seen as beneath notice. Sam didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. With his head held high and his envelope still clutched tightly to his chest, he walked through the grand doors and into the harsh morning sun. It's a strange thing how society judges worth. Sam had more honesty in the lines of his palm than many of those men had in their whole lives. But it didn't matter. His boots were dusty, his jacket was worn, his money wasn't wrapped in the right kind of paper. In the eyes of that room, he was nobody. America often claims to honor hard work, perseverance, and decency. But too often those values are only praised when dressed up in the right suit, backed by the right connections, or certified with the right kind of paperwork. Sam Harris lived those values every day, in every season, in every rough acre of his fields. Yet today, because he didn't fit their polished picture of success, he was brushed aside like something inconvenient. He sat down heavily on the tailgate of his truck, the envelope still safe in his jacket. His hands, so sure when gripping a plow or fixing a fence, trembled slightly now. Not from anger, not even from shame, but from the heavy realization that in the world beyond his fields, a man's worth was measured in appearances. Not endurance, in procedures, not principles. Sam gazed at the courthouse, a stoic figure, against a backdrop of stone, columns, and glass, waiting for the inevitable, waiting to lose everything he had spent a lifetime building. He didn't know it yet, but destiny and a woman in a navy blue suit were already on their way. Sam Harris sat on the tailgate of his truck, his weathered hands folded over the envelope that now felt heavier than the sun beating down on his shoulders. Inside the courthouse, the auction rolled forward without him. His family's farm, his legacy, would soon belong to someone who had never walked its fields or planted its crops. In the sterile world of property transactions, Sam was just a footnote. And then the sound came, distant at first, but growing louder. Sirens, engines. Sam looked up, squinting into the sun. 5 black SUVs, their windows darkened, tore into the courthouse parking lot, flanked by 2 police motorcycles. Each SUV bore a small but unmistakable symbol. The state flag. Doors opened in a synchronized motion. Security agents emerged, scanning the area with brisk train movements. And from the center SUV, a woman stepped out. Governor Melissa Grant herself, a force of nature, wrapped in a sharp navy suit, moving with the authority of someone who wasn't here to make small talk. The crowd of investors and clerks froze mid-sentence. their conversations dropping into stunned silence. The same people who had laughed as Sam was ushered out now scrambled to clear the governor's path. Cameras from local news outlets swiveled. Reporters shouted questions, but Governor Grant didn't break stride. Her focus was unshakable as she entered the courthouse. It's easy to think of government as a slow, uncaring machine. Endless forms, red tape decisions made behind closed doors. And often that's true. Bureaucracies move at the speed of caution. Policies are layered under procedures, each step insulated against blame. People get lost, injustices get buried. But sometimes change comes not from the system, but from individuals within it. Leaders who recognize that rules exist to serve people, not the other way around. Governor Grant, with all the political calculation of a seasoned official, had seen something in Sam Harris's letter, something that cut through the noise and demanded action. Inside the hall, the auctioneer barely had time to react before the governor's voice rang out, firm and commanding, "This proceeding is temporarily suspended." The room stilled. Whispers darted between bidders. The auctioneer, pale and flustered, pointed vaguely toward the door when asked about Sam Harris. "Find him," Governor Grant instructed her aides. Minutes later, Sam stood face to face with the most powerful person in the state. He removed his cap, feeling suddenly very small under her steady gaze. "Mr. Harris," she said, extending her hand. "I received your letter." Sam fumbled slightly as he shook her hand. "I didn't expect... I never thought... I read every letter that crosses my desk," she said, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. Whether or not it was entirely true didn't matter. What mattered was that today it was true for him. Governor Grant turned to her staff issue an administrative hold on the Miller property transaction under Regulation 42B for improper notification of sale terms. Sam blinked, struggling to keep up. Bureaucratic language wasn't his field, but he understood enough the sale was stopped for now. Real leadership is rare. It requires seeing past procedures to the people they affect. Governor Grant didn't just suspend the sale because it was politically convenient. Though surely she understood the optics. She did it because somewhere in her career of balancing budgets and signing legislation, she hadn't forgotten that government at its best is supposed to serve the people. There are moments in American history where public pressure has turned the tide. Rosa Parks refusing to move from her seat didn't end segregation alone, but it lit a fire. A single photo of a man standing before a tank in Tiananmen Square didn't bring down a regime, but it woke the conscience of the world. Small acts of defiance, dignity, and visibility often carry power, far beyond the moment itself. Sam Harris didn't set out to become a symbol. He didn't plan a protest. He simply showed up with his life savings in an envelope and the unwavering belief that fairness still mattered. And because one leader decided to listen instead of dismiss the quiet fight of one farmer, shook the heavy machinery of bureaucracy into motion. As Sam stood there, the envelope still pressed against his chest, a strange feeling washed over him. Not victory, not yet, but for the first time in days, he felt something even more precious. Hope. 3 days after the auction, Sam Harris received a call that he almost didn't answer. He wasn't used to strange numbers lighting up the dusty landline in his kitchen, but something nudged him to pick it up. On the other end, a woman from the governor's office explained in careful words that Sam needed to come into town again. There were a few additional matters to discuss. Sam hung up the phone with a sinking feeling. After everything, maybe they had found some loophole. Maybe hope had been a little too much to ask. Still, he put on his blue Sunday shirt once more and drove the old pickup down familiar roads, each mile heavier than the last. At the county administration building, the atmosphere was different this time. Staff members greeted him by name. They smiled, not the tight, dismissive smiles from before, but genuine apologetic ones. He was led into a modest conference room where a small group of officials waited. Coffee was offered. Sam, feeling out of place, simply nodded. The county administrator cleared his throat and slid a thick folder toward Sam. In short, respectful sentences, he explained the tax errors that had triggered the auction were invalid. His property was no longer under threat. It was officially and fully his again. Sam exhaled slowly, the weight of months lifting from his chest. But before he could gather himself, the administrator added, "There's something else." A second envelope was placed before him, this one sealed in crisp ivory paper. The woman from the governor's office smiled warmly. An individual has come forward, she said, offering to cover any remaining financial obligations tied to your property and more. Sam stiffened. He shook his head. I don't take charity. The woman's voice was soft but insistent. It's not charity, Mr. Harris. They consider it repayment. Inside the envelope was a letter handwritten in neat, careful script. Dear Mr. Harris, when I was 10 years old, my family nearly lost everything. We had no money for seeds, no food to spare. You gave us a paper bag filled with seeds from your own shed. You taught my father how to plant them, how to work the stubborn earth. That garden fed us through the worst year of our lives I never forgot. Today I'm in a position to return a fraction of the kindness you showed us. Thank you for saving my family when you didn't even know it. A child who once ran through your fields. Sam read the letter twice before setting it down, his hands trembling slightly. He tried to remember the boy's so many faces, so many seasons ago, but the memory remained blurred. It hadn't been an act of charity back then. It had just been the right thing to do. And yet here it was, decades later, rippling back to him like a long-forgotten seed pushing through hard soil. Sometimes the smallest gestures, the ones we make without expecting anything in return, carry echoes that travel farther than we can imagine. We plant kindness without realizing that someday, somewhere, it might bloom into a lifeline we ourselves will need. For Sam Harris, it wasn't just his farm that had been saved. It was the living proof that dignity, compassion, and decency, though often invisible, are never truly wasted. They just wait for their season to come. Sam Harris never imagined that a grainy security camera video would change the course of his life. Yet within hours of the governor's intervention, the footage of an elderly farmer being escorted out of the courthouse and the dramatic arrival of Governor Melissa Grant spread across the internet like wildfire. Local news stations aired it first. By nightfall, national networks had picked it up. In a rare moment of unity, Americans across the political spectrum found something they could agree on. Dignity matters. Conservatives praised Sam's self-reliance and commitment to family legacy. Progressives hailed his fight against a system that too often crushed the voiceless. For a brief shining moment, his story bridged divides that had seemed impossible to cross. Newspapers ran headlines like, "The Farmer Who Stood Alone and Won." Talk shows debated the deeper meaning behind the auction scandal. Commentators called for reform. But amid the noise, Sam remained the same steady figure he had always been. Fame was not something he sought. If anything, it unsettled him. When the invitation came to speak at the state agricultural fair, Sam almost declined. He wasn't a public speaker. He wasn't polished. His world was soil and seasons, not microphones and crowds. But Governor Grant personally called him, encouraging him to share his story not for attention, but to inspire action. So on a warm Saturday afternoon, Sam found himself standing behind a podium, looking out over a sea of faces. His knees shook slightly. His hands gripped the edges of the wooden stand. He wore his best shirt again, freshly pressed and tucked inside his jacket pocket was the same envelope, now empty, that had once held his life savings. He began slowly, voice rough with nerves. I'm not a politician. I'm just a farmer. I didn't come here to make a point or start a movement. I came to save the only home I've ever known. Sam paused the large video screens behind him, displaying the now famous footage. The image of him being led away, head bowed but unbroken, hung in the air like a silent anthem. What I learned, he continued, voice gaining strength, is that sometimes doing the right thing doesn't mean shouting the loudest. It means standing your ground quietly, even when nobody seems to notice. By the time he finished, many in the crowd were wiping their eyes. At the end of the event, Governor Grant returned to the stage to announce a new initiative, the Family Farm Preservation Act. Designed to protect long-standing family farms from predatory auctions and bureaucratic errors, the initiative was a direct result of Sam's quiet battle. Sam Harris had never wanted to be a symbol. Yet in standing for his land, he had stood for something larger, a reminder that the strength of a nation isn't found only in its cities, corporations, or headlines. It's rooted in the humble, unseen lives that quietly hold everything together. One man, one farm. And a story the world wasn't allowed to forget. In the weeks that followed, the media frenzy slowly faded, as it always does. But for Sam Harris, life returned to a rhythm he understood. He rose with the sun, walked the familiar rows of earth, and let his hands find comfort in the old routines. His farm, once nearly lost, felt more alive than ever. Word of his story brought small but meaningful changes. School groups visited to learn about farming and history. Neighbors who had once passed with only a nod now stopped to lend a hand or simply sit and talk. Sam never asked for recognition, but in quiet ways the community made sure he knew he mattered. Through it all, Sam remained himself steady, humble and rooted in a tradition older than memory. His story wasn't about grand speeches or headlines. It was about the silent strength of doing what's right, even when no one is watching. Sam Harris's story reminds us that in today's fast-paced world, the values of hard work, quiet dignity, and community spirit still matter deeply. It's easy to feel invisible when systems grow too big and the noise of modern life drowns out the voices of ordinary people. But as Sam showed us, standing firm for what's right, even when no one seems to notice, can echo farther than we ever imagine. In a time when headlines often focus on the powerful and the loudest voices, perhaps the real strength lies in the quiet hands that build, protect, and nourish our communities. Have you ever witnessed someone's quiet strength change the course of a life or even a community? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your story in the comments below. Thank you for spending time with us today and honoring Sam's journey. If you believe stories like this need to be remembered, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and help us keep these lessons alive for the next generation. Sometimes it's not the noise that changes the world. It's the steady heartbeat of those who refuse to give up.